They thought he was just a man of God until he picked up a gun and shot faster than anyone they'd ever seen. The preacher had a past, and it was riding hard to catch up to him. What happens next will test his faith and his trigger finger. Keep listening to uncover the truth behind the blood-soaked gospel. Harmony Creek was a town like any other, nestled between rolling hills and a wide, clear river. But recently, sadness hung heavy in the air. A terrible fire had swept through, leaving the town's beloved church in ashes. The church wasn't just a building, it was the heart of Harmony Creek. It was where they celebrated good times and found comfort during bad ones. Now with the church gone, the people felt lost. Children didn't laugh as much. The general store stayed mostly empty, even the sun seemed to shine a little less bright. Old Martha, who always had a kind word for everyone, now just sat on her porch, rocking slowly with a faraway look in her eyes. The townsfolk tried to rebuild, but their hearts weren't in it. The fire had taken more than just wood and stone, it had taken their hope. They needed a spark, something to bring them back together. They needed someone to remind them that even after the darkest night, the sun always rises again. They needed a miracle, or maybe, just maybe, a preacher. Someone to lead them, to guide them, and to help them rebuild not just the church, but their shattered spirits as well. Then one dusty afternoon, a lone figure appeared on the horizon. He rode a tired-looking horse, and his clothes were simple, almost worn. As he got closer, the people saw he was a preacher. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile, and his voice was soft when he spoke. "My name is Reverend Eli," he said, tipping his hat. "I heard about the fire. I've come to help." The townspeople were surprised. They hadn't expected anyone to come. Old Man Hemlock, the town's grumpy elder, squinted at the preacher. "Help how? We ain't got no money to pay you." Reverend Eli smiled again. "I don't need payment. Just a place to sleep and some food to eat. I know a thing or two about building, and I know a lot about hope." His words were like a cool drink on a hot day. A few people started to smile. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. Martha, the old woman on the porch, stopped rocking and looked at the preacher with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Harmony Creek might just have found the spark it desperately needed. The next morning, Reverend Eli was already hard at work. He didn't just stand around giving orders. He was right there with them, lifting heavy timbers, hammering nails, and sweating under the hot sun. He knew how to build strong, and he knew how to inspire. He told stories while they worked, stories of hope and kindness, stories that reminded them of the good in the world. He praised their efforts, making each person feel important and valued. Even Old Man Hemlock started to crack a smile now and then. Soon, the sound of hammering filled the air again. Children started playing in the streets, their laughter echoing through the town. The general store began to buzz with activity as people bought supplies for the rebuilding. The sun seemed to shine a little brighter each day. Reverend Eli wasn't just rebuilding the church, he was rebuilding Harmony Creek. He was showing them that even after a great loss, they could still find strength in each other. He was teaching them that hope wasn't just a feeling. It was something they could build brick by brick, nail by nail, smile by smile. Harmony Creek was slowly coming back to life, thanks to the quiet preacher with the kind eyes and a heart full of hope. But as the days turned into weeks, some folks started noticing things. Little things at first, like the scars on Reverend Eli's hands. They weren't the kind of scars you got from hammering nails. They looked like knife wounds. Then there was the way he moved. He was always calm and gentle, but there was a quickness about him, a sense of alertness, like he was always watching, always ready. Billy, the blacksmith's son, saw a snake near the church one day. Before anyone could react, Reverend Eli had drawn a small knife and pinned the snake to the ground with lightning speed. It was over in a blink, but Billy swore he'd never seen anyone move so fast. And then there were the men. 3 rough-looking characters who always seemed to be hanging around the edge of town. They never caused any trouble, but they watched Reverend Eli, always watching. They looked like they were protecting him, but they also looked dangerous. Whispers started to spread. Who was this quiet preacher, really? And what was he hiding? Harmony Creek was about to find out that Reverend Eli was more than just a man of God. He was a man with a past. A past that was about to catch up with him. The flickering lamplight cast long shadows across the dusty saloon floor. A younger Eli, known then as Cutter, slammed his fist on the table, scattering cards and sending glasses flying. His eyes, cold and hard, scanned the room. He was a whirlwind of fury, a storm of bullets and blood. "Where is he?" Cutter roared, his voice a gravelly growl. The other men, hardened outlaws themselves, cowered in fear. Cutter was a legend, a ruthless killer with a reputation that stretched across the territories. He left a trail of bodies wherever he went. He was the fastest gun in the West, feared by sheriffs and admired by outlaws. He took what he wanted when he wanted, and no one dared to stop him. He was a monster, a shadow lurking in the darkness, but even monsters can change. This glimpse into Cutter's past was a stark contrast to the gentle preacher of Harmony Creek. The scars on his hands weren't just from knife fights, they were marks of a life lived in violence. A life he desperately wanted to leave behind. A life that wouldn't let him go so easily. The man they called Cutter was buried, but the grave was about to be opened. That night, Reverend Eli couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his cot in the small room he'd been given, his head in his hands. The image of Cutter, the man he used to be, haunted him. He remembered the faces of the people he'd hurt, the lives he'd taken. The guilt was a heavy weight on his soul. He got down on his knees and prayed. "Please, God," he whispered, his voice filled with anguish. Help me be the man I want to be. Help me protect these people. I don't want to be Cutter anymore. I want to be Eli, your servant." He knew it wouldn't be easy. The darkness inside him was always there, lurking, waiting for a chance to resurface. He had to fight it every day, every hour, every minute. He had to choose good over evil, kindness over violence. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and prayed for strength. He prayed for forgiveness. He prayed for Harmony Creek. He knew his past was coming, and he knew he had to be ready, not as Cutter the killer, but as Eli the preacher. He had to protect the town, even if it meant facing the darkness he had tried so hard to bury. The peace of Harmony Creek was shattered when a group of riders thundered into town, kicking up dust and scattering chickens. They were rough-looking men, mean-eyed and heavily armed. They wore dusty clothes and carried rifles across their laps. Their leader, a man with a cruel smile and a scar across his face, reined in his horse in front of the general store. "Looking for someone," he said, his voice a low growl that sent shivers down the spines of the townsfolk. "A man who calls himself Reverend Eli." Fear gripped the town. The laughter and joy that had filled the air just days before were replaced by a heavy silence. Everyone knew who they were looking for. They were the ones who had been shadowing Reverend Eli, the ones who made people whisper. The leader's eyes narrowed. "He used to be called Cutter. Maybe you know him by that name," he spat on the ground. "He owes us, and we've come to collect." The outlaws had arrived, bringing the darkness of Cutter's past with them. Harmony Creek was no longer a haven, it was a battleground. The fight for Reverend Eli's soul, and for the soul of the town, was about to begin. Reverend Eli stepped out of the half-built church, his face grim. He knew this day was coming. He walked towards the outlaws, his hands empty, his eyes filled with a sad resolve. "I'm Eli," he said, his voice calm but firm. "What do you want?" The leader, whose name was Silas, laughed. "We want what you owe us, Cutter. You left us high and dry after that bank job, and we don't take kindly to deserters." Silas's men started to spread out, surrounding Reverend Eli. The townspeople watched from their windows, fear etched on their faces. Old Man Hemlock, surprisingly, stood on his porch, a shotgun in his hands. "I don't have any money," Reverend Eli said. "I'm not Cutter anymore, I'm trying to do good." "Good," Silas sneered. "You're a killer, Cutter." "That's all you'll ever be." He nodded to his men. "Take him." The outlaws moved forward, but Reverend Eli's three shadowy protectors stepped in front of him, their guns drawn. A tense standoff ensued. Reverend Eli didn't want violence, but he knew he had to protect the town. His past was here, and it was about to explode. The air crackled with tension. A shot rang out, fired by Silas, aimed at the sky. "Last chance, Cutter," he yelled. "Come with us, or this town pays the price." Reverend Eli looked at the faces of the townspeople, their eyes pleading with him. He couldn't let them get hurt. He stepped forward, pushing past his protectors. "All right, Silas," he said. "I'll go with you, just leave them alone." But Silas wasn't satisfied. "Too late for that, Cutter. My men are going to have some fun." He signaled to his gang, and they started to loot the general store, smashing windows and terrifying the townsfolk. Reverend Eli couldn't stand by and watch. With a speed that surprised even himself, he disarmed two of the outlaws, using their own guns to knock them unconscious. He moved like a whirlwind, dodging bullets and delivering swift, precise blows. He wasn't trying to kill them, just disable them. He was using his skills, the skills of Cutter, but for a different purpose, to protect the innocent. He was walking a fine line between his past and his present, between the darkness and the light. Reverend Eli stood amidst the chaos, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked at his hands, the hands that had once held guns and spilled blood. Now they were bruised and scraped from protecting the innocent. He realized he couldn't run from Cutter. Cutter was a part of him, a shadow he could never escape. But he could control that shadow. He could use his skills, his strength for good. He had tried to bury Cutter, to pretend he didn't exist, but that was a mistake. He had to face his past, acknowledge it, and use it to protect the present. He looked at Silas, his eyes filled with a newfound resolve. "This ends here," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm not running anymore." He knew what he had to do. He had to confront Silas, not as Cutter, the ruthless killer, but as Eli, the protector of Harmony Creek. He had to show Silas that even a monster could change, that even the darkest past could be redeemed. He would face his demons and he would win, for himself and for the town he had come to love. The showdown began with a deafening roar. Silas and his remaining men opened fire, bullets whizzing through the air. Reverend Eli moved with incredible speed, dodging the shots and using his knowledge of the town to his advantage. He ducked behind barrels, leaped over fences, and used the half-built church as cover. He disarmed the outlaws one by one, using his fists and feet with deadly precision. He could have killed them, he was that good, but he didn't. He aimed for their arms and legs, disabling them without taking their lives. He remembered the faces of the men he had killed as Cutter, and he refused to add to that list. Silas, enraged, charged at Reverend Eli, a knife in his hand. They fought hand-to-hand, a brutal struggle between two men with a shared past. Reverend Eli managed to disarm Silas, throwing the knife away. He had him pinned to the ground, his fist raised to strike, but he hesitated. He looked into Silas's eyes and saw not just hatred but pain. He saw a reflection of his former self. He lowered his fist. "It doesn't have to be this way, Silas," he said. "You can change." He offered his hand to help Silas up. Silas spat at him. "I'm too far gone, Cutter." Reverend Eli sighed. "Then I'll just have to show you that it's never too late." Silas refused to listen, his heart hardened by years of violence and regret. But something remarkable happened. Two of Silas's men, who had witnessed Reverend Eli's mercy and courage, stepped forward. "He's right, Silas," one of them said, his voice hesitant but firm. "There's got to be a better way." The other nodded. "We're tired of running, tired of fighting. We want to change." Silas looked at them, betrayal in his eyes. He realized he had lost, not just the fight but his hold on his men. His gang, the only family he had ever known, was falling apart. Reverend Eli's actions had spoken louder than any words. He had shown them that there was another path, a path of forgiveness and redemption. He had defeated them not with violence but with kindness. Silas, defeated and alone, finally agreed to leave Harmony Creek, taking the remaining outlaws with him. As they rode away, the two men who had spoken out turned back to Reverend Eli. Can we stay?" one of them asked. "Can you teach us how to be better men?" Reverend Eli smiled. "Welcome home," he said. His journey of redemption had just begun, and now others were joining him. The townspeople watched everything unfold, their fear slowly turning into understanding. They had seen Reverend Eli, the gentle preacher, fight with the skill of a gunslinger, but they had also seen his mercy, his compassion. They had heard Silas call him Cutter, and they knew now that he had a past, a dark and violent past. But they didn't care. They had seen his true heart, his willingness to sacrifice himself for them. They had seen him protect their town, not with hatred but with love. They had seen him offer forgiveness to his enemies. Old Man Hemlock, who had been the most skeptical of all, stepped forward. He walked up to Reverend Eli and shook his hand. "Welcome to Harmony Creek, Reverend," he said, a rare smile on his face. "We're proud to have you." The other townspeople followed suit, offering their support and gratitude. They had seen the darkness in Reverend Eli's past, but they had also seen the light in his soul. They knew he wasn't perfect, but they also knew he was a good man, a man who deserved a second chance. They accepted him not as Cutter, the outlaw, but as Reverend Eli, their leader, their friend, their hope. Harmony Creek had found its savior, and he had found his home. With renewed vigor and a shared sense of purpose, the townspeople set about rebuilding the church. Reverend Eli, along with his two new companions, led the charge. They worked tirelessly, side by side, their hands calloused but their hearts full. The church rose from the ashes, stronger and more beautiful than before. It was built not just with wood and stone, but with hope and forgiveness. It was a symbol of their resilience, their ability to overcome adversity. The town was transformed. Laughter filled the streets again. The general store thrived. Children played games, their faces bright with joy. Harmony Creek was truly living up to its name. Reverend Eli had finally found peace. He had faced his demons and he had emerged victorious. He was no longer running from his past, he was embracing his future. He had found a home, a purpose, and a community that loved and accepted him for who he was. Cutter was gone, but Eli, the preacher, was here to stay, and he was ready to lead his flock towards a brighter tomorrow. The darkness had passed, and the light had returned to Harmony Creek. And this time it was here to stay. Years passed. Harmony Creek continued to thrive under Reverend Eli's gentle guidance. The church stood tall, a beacon of hope for all who sought solace and forgiveness. The scars on Reverend Eli's hands remained, a constant reminder of his past, but they no longer held him captive. They were a symbol of his transformation, his journey from darkness to light. He stood on the steps of the church, watching the sun set over the rolling hills. His two former enemies, now his closest friends, stood beside him. They had become respected members of the community, helping others find their own path to redemption. Reverend Eli was no longer hiding, no longer afraid. He was Reverend Eli, the preacher of Harmony Creek, a man with a past, but a man with a future. He was a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of forgiveness, and a living example that even the most broken souls can be healed. He looked out at the town he had come to love, his heart filled with gratitude. Harmony Creek had given him a second chance, a chance to be the man he always wanted to be. And he, in turn, had given them something even greater, the unwavering belief that anything is possible as long as you have hope, faith, and a little bit of forgiveness in your heart.